mandating brick in areas that don't have brick, like post-World War II homes. We have areas like that. And so that's a discussion that we're having further, because we don't want to have that cause more displacement. And we don't want that to cause more gentrification and say, oh, this overlay requirement is so restrictive that it'd be easier to scrape, because that's often what happens in Northwest Denver. Is it's easier to scrape and start new than to use an older structure and adaptively reuse it because our code is so rigid. So no, not on that one necessarily. And I couldn't remember the last one that you asked me.
It was just the brick, the front porches, and then the finished floor height was the third one.
The finished floor height, no, that one isn't getting to the anti-displacement. That's more of looking at the built environment, and it's preserving the sense of place that we have in Sunnyside. And we've had a lot of conversation when this overlay first took place. It was massive, as I'm sure Brad can talk about. It probably had lots of different solutions. And so we have narrowed this down to be as simplistic as possible. But that one is just preserving the place and making sure that we understand that this is one of Denver's original neighborhoods.
Right. Thank you for all of that, Councilwoman. I appreciate it. When you're talking about being able to keep existing structures and reuse them and prevent the scrapes, I did notice in some of those pictures that there were homes that have a front stoop. Would you be willing to add any kind of language into this that allows for front stoop? So those houses that do have them, if they wanted to alter, they wouldn't be put into a position of having to build a front porch.
I would be open to suggestions like that. That's why I think it's so important that we are here in front of you. And if you could provide us with what you think the dimensions are for a good stoop to be usable, we're absolutely open to having that conversation.
I don't think that's going to be my area expertise, Councilwoman, to provide the exact size of a stoop based on the houses in the neighborhood. I think that's probably more appropriate coming from the community and architects within the community that know that housing stock better than I do. So I thank you for asking for my input, and we'll defer to the community on those front stoops. And then just my last comment, Councilwoman, would be the concern about government making homes less accessible to people who have less mobility than a fully able-bodied person. So the one home that I did see not allowed on one of those slides was a universal entry, and I looked at that and said, hey, somebody who needs to use a wheelchair to get around could get into that house. And so that's just the one. I understand preserving the character that everything's kind of bumped up, but there's also got to be a place for everybody in our neighborhoods, and including those who need to use a wheelchair to get around. I'd ask you to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. The queue as I have it is Fred, Gosha, and then myself. Fred.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi, for bringing the mobility question up. I have to say that was one of the, to me, most, I guess, disturbing elements of this is that, essentially you're mandating houses that say folks who need to use wheelchairs really aren't welcome to move to this neighborhood. And I think in terms of people trying to purchase houses that they can age in place in and really stay in a neighborhood for a long time, 12 inches up above grade means a 12-foot ramp to access your house. And again, I'm not sure how compatible that ends up being with the porch requirement. So I really would encourage you guys to maybe spend some time with the folks at the city who specialize in mobility and access and ADA to see how this might relate to that. When we talk about this being one of Denver's original neighborhoods, at that time, I don't think we cared so much about people who had mobility issues. They weren't really expected to leave the house.
Welcome to the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee meeting of Denver City Council. Full coverage of this session of the Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee begins now.
The Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee. I am Councilman Chris Herndon. I am your committee chair. If I look tired, it's because I am, but that's a separate story. First thing I like to do is go around the virtual room first to have my colleagues introduce myself. We do have one colleague online.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mandy Sandoval, Northwest Denver District 1. Thank you.
And then we'll now start with our colleagues in chambers, and I'll start to my left.
Good morning, Jamie Torres, District 3.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Stacy Gilmore, District 11.
Good morning, Kendra Black, District 4.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. As best I can remember, I am Paul Cashman, represent South Denver District 6.
All right, thank you. We have two action items on. First one we have up is 694, approving a map amendment in Council District 5.
Good morning, members of City Council. My name is Fran Peñafiel, Senior City Planner with CPD, and today I am going to present you rezoning for 5101 Leedsdale Drive. The request is to rezone out of PUD 436 into ETUB. The proposed rezoning is located in Council District 5, which is Amanda Sawyer's district, and it is a vacant lot in the Washington, Virginia Vale neighborhood. The property owner, Augustana Lutheran Church of Denver, with Habitat for Humanity of Metro Denver, are proposing to rezone part of the property from PUD 436 to ETUB, which would allow for the development of 4 duplex that they intend to sell to households making at or below 80% of the area median income. The proposed Urban Edge TUB zone district allows for the urban house, detached accessory dwelling units, duplex, and tandem house building forms. The current zoning of the subject site, as I previously mentioned, is PUD 436. This PUD was adopted in 1997 and applies to a whole parcel, as shown on the map. It was intended to allow for the construction of a single building with 66 units for a special care home for senior citizens. It allows a maximum height for the building of up to 35 feet. The facility was supposed to be an extension of the ministry of Augustana Lutheran Church, but financing was not secured, and the special care home was never developed. The PUD also allows for the development of uses allowed on the R1 district, which is predominantly single-unit district in former Chapter 59. While the subject site is currently vacant, the portion of the zone lot that is now being rezoned is currently being used as an informal open space and vegetable garden. Sorry, the zone lot that is not being rezoned, so the rest of the PUD. The existing land use on this site is vacant. It's surrounded by mostly public, quasi-public, where the church is to the northwest, single-unit residential to the north, northeast and east, and commercial retail to the south. While the subject site is currently vacant, the portion of the zone lot that is not being rezoned is currently being used as an informal open space and vegetable garden. Sorry for repeating that. This slide shows the existing current surrounding the subject site, with the proposed rezoning site on the top right. On the bottom right image, you can see the commercial uses just south of the site on Leedsdale, and on the top right image of the existing informal open space and vegetable garden in the rest of the site. Image there. Throughout the rezoning process, application notifications have been provided according to code requirements. Planning Board recommended approval unanimously on May 18th, and currently the City Council public hearing is scheduled for July 25th. Since the staff report was published, we have received 2 letters of support, one from the Preservation of Residential South Hilltop Neighborhood Association, and one from a community member. Staff also received 1 letter in opposition to this rezoning that expresses concerns with traffic and density. As you all know, we have 5 review criteria when analyzing the appropriateness of the request. The first criterion is consistency with adopted plans. There are 2 plans applicable to this rezoning. We have Comprehensive Plan 2040 and Blueprint Denver. The rezoning is consistent with several of the strategies in comprehensive plan, and they can be found on the staff report. Now looking at Blueprint Denver, the future neighborhood context is urban edge. Within the context, we find a range of uses from single unit and multi-unit residential to commercial corridor and centers. As the rezoning would allow a variety of building forms in the urban edge setting, the proposed district is appropriate and consistent with the Blueprint Denver context description. The future place of this area is called Community Corridor, which typically provides some mix of office, commercial, and residential, and heights generally can go up to 5 stories. Dakota Avenue and Fairfax Street are designated as local or undesignated streets, and Leedsdale is classified as a commercial arterial future street type. Interesting to know, while this address, it's on Leedsdale, it only has a tiny little road that goes from Leedsdale. The access to this side would be in Dakota and Fairfax Street. The proposed CTUB district is consistent with these descriptions because it is in a residential district that allows for single unit and 2-unit uses and is intended to promote existing and future patterns of lower scale multi-unit building forms. The subject property is located within the community centers and corridors growth area. These areas are expected to see 20% of new employment growth and 25% of new housing growth by 2040. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the growth strategy mapped in this area. Blueprint also has policy language around rezoning properties from former Chapter 59 zoning code and out of custom zoning, such as the site plan specific conditions on this subject property. Therefore, staff finds that this proposed rezoning is consistent with Blueprint Denver. Staff also finds that the requested rezoning meets the next 2 criteria. The rezoning will result in uniformity of district regulations, and it will further the public health, safety, and welfare of the city, primarily through its implementation of adopted plans and through improving design standards. Additionally, rezoning out of a portion of PUD 436 will not have negative impact on the remainder of the site, and development under the current PUD would still be possible. This rezoning would bring this property from former Chapter 59 zoning into the Denver zoning code. Such change is listed as one of the zoning code as the appropriate justifying circumstance. Lastly, staff finds that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the zone district purpose and intent of the ETUB zone district. Based on the review criteria, staff recommends City Council approve the proposed rezoning.
Thank you, Fran. I want to welcome Councilwoman Seda Baca. She's online joining us. Thank you, Councilwoman. Have any questions or comments? 694, Councilwoman Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Fran. So just trying to understand the PUD, this area to be rezoned isn't a separate parcel yet, or no?
Not yet. So after the rezoning, the applicant is going to go through a zone lot amendment. They already had like a concept meeting with development services, so they know what area they're going to, it's exactly what's rezoned. It's going to come out of the PUD. So It's going to be a separate zone lot.
And it's, the PUD called for something pretty specific, right? Why aren't we just eliminating the whole thing? Is there a chance that it could someday become, was it a senior facility?
No.
Special care home for senior citizens?
So we talked about that with the applicant, but right now they were in a hurry to get this duplex done, and because they're providing affordable housing, we thought there was no reason to delay them. Right now, the rest of the zone lot is used as a park, and they're not planning on doing anything different. We talked about the possibility of rezoning to an open space.
Okay.
That could be an option later on, but again, because it's applicant-driven, they're only asking to do this site. We thought it was okay. It was
okay. The road that leads into the property, it's not a city right away, right? No. Okay. Interesting site. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Torres. Any other questions or comments? 694. Seeing none, I have a motion to move 694 to the full council. Can I get a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Torres. Any objections from the voting members? Seeing none, 694 moves to the full council.
Thank you.
All right, I just lost my spot. I'll let me pull that back up again. We have one more. I believe this is in Council District 7. It is 699. Libby, welcome. You can introduce yourself and take away. Colleagues, any questions or comments? We'll get you after the presentation.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Normally we just pull it up from PowerPoint. Thank you. All right. And good morning. I am Libby Kaiser of CPD, and we are looking at a rezoning request for 1001 and 1003 South Pearl Street. The property is in Council District 7, represented by Jolon Clark, and it's in the Washington Park West neighborhood. The subject property is located southwest of South Pearl Street and East Tennessee Avenue near I-25, and the Louisiana Pearl Light Rail Station is within 1/2 mile of the property. The lot contains over 9,000 square feet and includes a church with a residential unit on the second floor, as well as a surface parking lot. The property is currently in the USUB zone district, and the applicant is proposing to rezone to a PUD or planned unit development, which would allow for the reuse of the existing building. The existing zoning is within the urban neighborhood context and allows single unit houses with a minimum zone lot area of 4,500 square feet. Surrounding zoning includes single unit and row house residential zone districts, as well as Main Street districts that allow a mix of uses. In the immediate vicinity, the area's land use is predominantly single unit and 2 unit dwellings, with some commercial units or some commercial uses located near intersections. As shown in the bottom left photo, the subject property includes a church and a parking lot, while properties to the north contain 2-story homes. Properties to the east also contain single-unit homes, while properties on the southern end of the block include space for small-scale shops and services. The rezoning request is for a PUD, specifically PUD G29, that would expand the uses allowed in the former church. If the church were demolished, development on the property would have to comply with all the standards of the existing USUB district, which allows residential and some civic uses only in the urban house building form. The PUD would allow all uses permitted in the USUB district, including an existing dwelling unit on the second floor of the church building, as well as a subset of arts, recreation, and entertainment services, including an art gallery, artist studio, fitness and recreational sports center, personal instruction studio, and a professional studio. As well, the PUD would allow general office and dental and medical offices. This limited range of commercial uses is more restrictive than a standard mixed use or Main Street district in the urban neighborhood context. To facilitate reuse, the PUD acknowledges the current conditions of the subject property and includes custom standards for the existing building, vehicular parking, and landscaping. The City Council hearing is scheduled for August 15th, and to date, staff has received 2 letters and 1 presentation from nearby homeowners opposed to the rezoning as they question the need for new commercial uses to be allowed in the church building. Staff has also received 11 support letters advocating for reuse of the former church by the limited commercial uses proposed. As described in the applicant's narrative, they conducted extensive public outreach with the West Wash Park Neighborhood Association beginning in May of 2020. The applicant also met with adjacent neighbors on several occasions to discuss a potential PUD and the types of uses that might be allowed in the church building. Moving on to the Denver Zoning Code review criteria, it must be found that the rezoning is consistent with these 5 listed criteria. In regard to criteria 1, there are 3 adopted plans that apply to the requested rezoning, including the Comp Plan 2040, Blueprint Denver, and the West Wash Park Neighborhood Plan. As stated in the staff report, the rezoning is consistent with several goals in the comprehensive plan. A few of those goals relate to improving access to healthcare and the arts, and supporting the reuse of existing buildings and neighborhoods serving businesses. The rezoning request is also consistent with Blueprint Denver. The subject property is mapped as part of the urban neighborhood context, which is described as containing small, multi-unit residential and low-intensity mixed-use buildings embedded in single-unit and 2-unit residential areas with good walkability. The rezoning is also consistent with the future place type defined by Blueprint, as the subject property is designated as residential low, which is typically characterized by single unit uses with buildings up to 2.5 stories. However, the residential low place type also states that vacant institutional uses, such as churches, may be appropriate for additional development intensity. As for the future street type defined in Blueprint, both South Pearl Street and East Tennessee Avenue are categorized as local or undesignated streets, which can vary in their land uses and are found in all neighborhood contexts. With regard to the city's growth strategy, Blueprint Denver directs growth to key centers, corridors, and high-density residential areas that align with transportation options, while limited growth is desired in all other areas of the city, specifically 10% of jobs and 20% of housing by 2040. The proposed map amendment is consistent with this growth area, as it will facilitate a few new employment opportunities in proximity to the interstate and light rail. Furthermore, the proposed rezoning helps implement 2 Blueprint Denver policies related to land use and built form. First, the plan encourages compatible redevelopment of institutional sites within neighborhoods and says that until a citywide approach is implemented, individual rezonings are appropriate. Second, the plan seeks to preserve structures that contribute to an area's established character, even if such structures are not historic landmarks. Blueprint Denver also recommends against using custom zoning tools like PUDs, except when unique or extraordinary circumstances exist. While a standard mixed use or Main Street Zone district, such as UMX2X or UMS2X, would also facilitate reuse for the former church, the full range of uses allowed in those districts could result in a higher intensity use than would be appropriate on a local street adjacent to single unit and 2 unit residences. In addition, rezoning to UMX2X or UMS2X district would allow for the redevelopment of the site within the general or shopfront building forms, which could be less compatible with the surrounding residential character, whereas the PUD either allows for reuse of the existing building or redevelopment within the urban house building form. Moving on to the West Wash Park neighborhood plan, which was approved in 1991. As such, this plan is significantly out of sync with the current Denver zoning code, which was updated in 2010. While the plan's recommendations don't clearly address the subject property, the plan does say that churches and other public facilities are integrated well into the neighborhood's residential fabric, and that all historic and architecturally significant structures should be maintained. Built in 1960, the former church on the subject property could be considered historic, although it isn't a designated landmark. Staff has determined that the proposed PUD is consistent with the intent of this neighborhood plan. The rezoning is also consistent with criteria 2, 3, and 5 as stated in the staff report. In regard to criteria 4, changing conditions in the city and a city adopted plan are the most applicable justifying circumstances for this rezoning. In this case, the rezoning is justified as the changing conditions affecting this particular area and the city generally reflect a national trend of declining congregations and closing churches. Blueprint Denver further justifies the rezoning with its policies related to the reuse of vacant institutional uses and the preservation of buildings that contribute to neighborhood character. Besides the previous criteria that apply to all map amendments, PUD rezonings must also comply with 5 additional criteria, which I'll walk through. The first PUD criteria requires rezonings meet the intent and purpose of PUD districts. PUD G29 meets this criteria because the subject site containing a church presents a unique opportunity to reuse a longstanding non-residential building embedded in a residential neighborhood. The PUD represents a thoughtful expansion of allowable uses that are more sensitive and less impactful than rezoning to a standard mixed use or Main Street Zone district that allows a much broader range of uses. In addition, the PUD is limited to reuse of the existing building or redevelopment within the urban house building form applicable to the USUB zone district and all related standards. In contrast, rezoning to a mixed use or Main Street district would allow for the redevelopment of the site within the general or shopfront building forms. The first PUD criteria also requires rezonings be consistent with the applicable neighborhood context, and to this end, PUD G29 is consistent with the urban neighborhood context and character and is not a vehicle to enhance a proposed development's economic feasibility. The PUD also provides several public benefits, including the diversification of land uses, more efficient use of land and energy, and compatible character and design with the surrounding area. The PUD also complies with all standards and criteria stated in Division 9.6. The PUD district is necessary because there is no standard zone district available that is specifically intended to allow reuse of this particular underutilized institutional site in a manner that is most compatible with surrounding residential uses. Finally, PUDs are intended to be compatible with existing buildings, and as the PUD is intended to facilitate reuse of the existing structure on the zone lot, the PUD doesn't prescribe a building form defined within the Denver zoning code, but rather defines key building form standards related to the existing building, including a 2-story maximum height, surface parking allowed between the building and the primary and side streets, and minimum street level transparency on the primary and side streets that matches current conditions. The existing building, established in 1960, is already compatible with adjacent residential buildings that vary in height from 1 to 2 stories, while the location of surface parking between the building and the primary street would not be allowed in a building form associated with a mixed use or main street district as defined today, and the existing street level transparency on the primary street is less than the general and shopfront building forms, the PUD necessarily defaults to existing conditions to ensure feasible reuse without costly modifications. The PUD also includes exemptions from current landscaping standards around existing surface parking that, if required, could significantly reduce the vehicular parking spaces provided on site. Most importantly, the standards embodied in the PUD acknowledge the time and place that the existing building was established, appreciate its longstanding history and compatibility in the immediate area, and seek to enable its longevity while avoiding significant reconstruction. Based on finding that all review criteria have been met, CPD recommends approval of this rezoning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. I want to welcome Councilman Clark to committee. Councilman Cashman, you are up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Remind me, how large is the site?
This is just over 9,000 square feet.
Just over 9?
Yep.
Okay. And B?
4,500.
4,500. So it sounds like the intent, and I know in a lot of letters that I've gotten from residents in the area, talk about preserving the church and the importance of that, but they don't have to, right? They could get their rezoning, tear down the church, and then build
up to 2 urban houses.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Let's see. What was one other thing that my tired brain is trying to retain? I think I'm going to have to stay with that. Thank you so much.
No problem. I heard it was a long night.
You good, Councilman? Thank you, Councilman Cashman. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, do we have a motion to move 699 to the full council? Moved by Councilmember Black, seconded by Councilmember Torres. Any objections from the voting members? Seeing none, 699 moves to the full council. We do have some items on consent, so if you have any issues about those items for the proposed consent, see myself or Emily. Seeing no other business before this committee, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.